It is 6:31 by my clock. It is Thursday, October 15th, and I'd like to start by just welcoming everybody who has taken time out of their evening to join with the existing Bridges Subcommittee for this public forum. So thank you for making time, and thank you for your attendance this evening. This is a public forum being put on by the existing Bridges Subcommittee, which reports to its parent committee, the Hinsdale Bridge Project Advisory Committee, established by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation and VTrans to provide advice during the construction of the bridge over the Connecticut River for Route 119. My name is Patrick Moreland. I am one of the subcommittee's co-chairs, along with my colleague Catherine Lynch from the town of Hinsdale. And we have been trading off back and forth who is responsible for chairing the meeting. And this month it's me. So I would like to talk a little bit about the existing Bridges Committee. Our charge, which is I think important to understand, is to develop a vision for the reuse of the island and for the two bridges that span the Connecticut River, which we've been using for so many years, the Charles Dana Bridge and the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge. I can see from the attendee list that several of our committee members are in attendance tonight. Because this is a Zoom meeting, it would be a little difficult and complicated to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So I'll go ahead and introduce the committee on their behalf. The existing Bridges Subcommittee consists of Steve Barrett, the Director of Public Works for the town of Brattleboro, Mark Kerrigan, the Brattleboro Police Captain, Jason Cooper, who is coming to us from the Friends of the West River, Steve DiOrio on the Select Board in the town of Hinsdale, Charles Ratage, who is the Police Chief for the town of Hinsdale, Drew Hazelton, the Chief at Rescue Inc. Of course, I mentioned Catherine Lynch. We've got Prudence McKenney, most recently of the Vermont Department of Health. Frank Podlinski, he is the with the Highway Department for town of Hinsdale. We have Ed Smith from Hinsdale Economic Development, Sharon Smith from Hinsdale Historical Society, and last but not least, Adam Grinold with the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Our committee, which was formed, I think, a little more than a year ago, has received staffing support from the Southwest Regional Planning Commission and from the Wyndham Regional Commission. But I'd like to take just a second and call out extra special attention for JB Mack, who's been with us since the beginning and has provided really excellent staff support to this committee. Thank you, JB, for all your hard work. A couple of housekeeping issues before we go too far. For the most part, mics and cameras will be muted except for presenters. There will be question and answer after each presentation, and then again at the end of the meeting as time permits. That will be led by our co-host, Catherine Lynch. In terms of making use of the question and answer, we ask that you use the chat function. For those of you who may be new to Zoom, the chat function is bottom center. It can be found at the bottom center of your screen. And that's how we would ask that you ask any questions. And if your question is directed at a very specific individual, or to a specific organization, go ahead and make that clear in your in what you write in the chat. In addition to the question and answer that will occur in the chat, we've planned a number of what are called polls. Those will be initiated by JB, and they will be asking you specific questions and asking you for very specific multiple choice answers. It is possible, one thing that folks should know about Zoom is that in order to see the poll, one must have first downloaded the Zoom software client. Not everybody uses that. A lot of people use the web interface. In that case, you might not see the poll. That would be too bad. And for future forums, we will make sure to let everybody know about the need to download the full Zoom client. If for some reason a poll is being conducted and you don't see it, go ahead and put your answer in the chat box, and we will appreciate that. Want to go over just a little bit the meeting agenda. Obviously, we're in welcome and introductions, and our next up would be the overview of the plans for the new bridge. That'll be presented by New Hampshire Department of Transportation for about 20 minutes. We'll come back. I'll talk a little bit about the goals for the project and ways that members of the public can stay informed. And then we'll turn it over to our friends at UMass Amherst for really, I think, the highlight of the presentation, which is a 30-minute discussion of some ideas for the island and the existing bridges. And I think you're really going to like these. They're kind of exciting. And then we'll wrap up the evening with questions and answers. As you can tell, what we're really interested in seeing too is that folks are informed about what's coming, both at the new bridge and for some of the ideas regarding the existing bridges and the island. We would like to gather input from everybody. So there are a variety of ways in which we'll be discussing how we can gather that input. The question and answer is part of that. The polling is going to be part of that. But there's another thing I'd like to raise for folks. That is, if you would like to stay in touch with the committee and to be informed about upcoming forums or meetings of the subcommittee, there's an email address that you can reach out to and be put on a list to be kept informed regularly. And that email address is admin, A-D-M-I-N, admin at swrpc.org. If you send an email to that address and say, JB, I'd like to be notified of future meetings, we'll make sure to keep you involved. And if any of the feedback, either from tonight about the ideas being discussed here, if you don't really want to comment tonight, but you want to think about it for a couple of days and let your ideas sort of develop before you write them down, go ahead and send those ideas or any concerns you have to admin at swrpc.org. We appreciate that. And thank you to the Southwest Regional Planning Commission for helping to make that possible. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to JB. We're going to get started with just a little bit of polling and take it away, JB.
Great. Yeah, we just wanted to first get a sense of who's on the call with us. I actually recognize many of you, but if you participate in the poll, again, as Patrick said, if you are not able to see the poll, I'm going to put the questions in the chat box as well, and you can answer that way if you're not able to see the poll. So let's go ahead and launch the poll. Does everybody see it in front of you now? There are 3 questions that we're asking just to get started here. If you're not seeing it, I am going to put in the chat box the questions, and you can answer that way. And what you want to do in the chat box is, since there's 3 questions, you put your answer after the number of the question. I'll give a little bit of time for everybody. So the first is, where do you reside? It's asking what state you live in. Have you ever been to Hinsdale Island? Yes or no? And how do you get to or travel through Hinsdale Island? I see quite a few people are participating. I'm going to let this go for 10 more seconds here. Okay, and I'm going to share the results with everyone. So about 42%, 10 of us are from New Hampshire, 13 from Vermont, got 1 from Massachusetts. Most people have been to Hinsdale Island, and most people visit it by car or pass through it by car, but there's several of you that have visited in other ways as well. So that's great to hear. We are going to be talking a lot about Hinsdale Island today. I'm going to pass this back to Patrick to move on with the agenda.
Okay, thank you, JB. Appreciate that. And we appreciate everybody for taking the time to participate in that poll. I would like to, at this time, turn it over to the New Hampshire Department of Transportation and to their project team. We've got Don Lyford, who's the project manager, Trent Zanes, who is the roadway section group leader within the Highway Design Bureau, and Bill Safayan, I believe I pronounced that correctly, I certainly hope I did. He is the bridge engineer within the Bridge Design Bureau. So New Hampshire DOT, please take it away.
Okay, so I have a short presentation. If I can share my screen, I'll pull that up. And so can everybody see this PowerPoint? Maybe it's coming up now. JB, can you see that?
Trent, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll get started. So this is the Hinsdale Brattleboro 12210C Bridge Replacement Project. The add date is currently scheduled for January 5th, 2021. We expect that it'll have a 4-week bid time, and then it'll go to Governor and Council, where the contract will be awarded to the contractor. The completion date is expected to be October 18th, 2024, with a total estimated cost of $56 million. So to give you a general project description, I think many of you are probably very familiar with this area, but this is New Hampshire 19 on the Hinsdale side. As you head west, you go through the first truss bridge over the island, and then the second truss bridge into Vermont 119, which is right next to the 5-way intersection. And then Vermont 142 proceeds south from there. And the project terminates right about here where Royal Road is. Some businesses and commercial developments of relevance is we've got 28 Vernon Street, or the former Marlborough College, which has a large parking lot here. Barrows and Fisher Oil, which has a fuel business located right next to the Connecticut River and on the east side of the railroad tracks. On the New Hampshire side in Hinsdale, we've got an active marina, and then the Deborah George's development here on Georges Field Road, which was the former Walmart site and now hosts Runnings. And just so, as I said, Royal Road is located down here. Opposite the marina, we have Mountain Road, which goes behind the Runnings development and then connects to a parking area for some hiking trails. And then Georges Field Road is the actual access point for this commercial development. So the proposed realignment of the bridge involves constructing an 1,800-foot bridge south of the existing 119 location. And so on the island, there is a boat access. It's a road to public waters, so it's a legally established access point. And however, when the project is complete, we'll be taking all the vehicle traffic off the existing 119, putting it on new 119. And therefore, there won't be any vehicle access to the island except for emergency vehicles. So that boat access will be really inaccessible to anyone with a vehicle. And we've worked with the Public Waters Access Advisory Board to determine a mitigation effort, which would be to improve a boat launch about 5 miles south in Hinsdale at an existing location on Prospect Street. So I've got some plans here, and what I'll do is I'll go over this kind of briefly, but and I'll bring up another plan that shows a close-up for you. I just need to get out of this. So this is sort of the plan that we were just looking at, and I'll start on the southern end of Vermont 142. And this is the Royal Road intersection. So we just have some approach work here. And as we proceed to the north, we're providing two 11-foot lanes, a 3-foot shoulder on the west side and a 5-foot shoulder on the east side. This will accommodate a future sidewalk that's to be constructed that will lead from Royal Road up to the new intersection here. There's a lot of stuff on the plan. I apologize for that. We've got some utility relocations and other things. In this quadrant here, we're showing a gravel wetland that's used to treat the stormwater that we collect. And then we have utility relocations, power, transmission, distribution that will all be put into conduit and run underneath the new intersection here. So let me quickly jump to the profile. So on the Vermont side, this is Vermont 142. So this is the rise and fall of the road as we construct it. Royal Road is down here. And as we proceed to the north, we'll raise the grade 12 feet. And that's quite a bit. And then we bring it back down to the existing grade. The reason for doing that is looking at the 119 profile. The railroad tracks are right here. So we're providing a separated grade crossing so that traffic won't be stopped every time the train comes through. And it also avoids any conflicts between vehicles and the train. So if I go back to this other plan, so again, this is 119 coming west to connect into 142 at a higher grade. And as we move forward, we have what's called an MSE retaining wall that's right along the edge of the new sidewalk. And that will separate, that will minimize the impacts to the parking area of 28 Vernon Street. And just to note that this sidewalk will continue up and connect to an existing location here. And then it will also cross the bridge to the New Hampshire side, which we'll move to in just a moment. This will be a signalized intersection with a left turn lane, the southbound left, a southbound through, northbound single lane, and then coming off the bridge, there'll be a left turn lane and a right turn lane. So as we cross the river, we have two 12-foot lanes, an 8-foot shoulder on either side. And as you can see in this spot here, we have what's called an overlook. There are two overlooks on the bridge, which will have interpretive signing as part of the plan. We cross over the tip of the island and come back into Hinsdale. And so on this side, we're actually crossing over the existing drive to the marina. And so for traffic control, we'll be keeping all of the traffic on 119 until the new bridge is complete and the roadway is sufficiently completed that we can then shift traffic over to the new 119. And then we'll construct an extension from Mountain Road up to the new 119. And then in this location here, where the existing steel truss bridges, we'll have some kind of path that leads to the bridge, which obviously is part of what we're discussing tonight, is how we want to work with the island, the bridges, and the approaches. What you see in this corner, it's kind of squiggly, but this is another treatment basin. It's a pond for collecting stormwater, treating it before it then outlets into the Connecticut River. So as we continue to the east, we have the sidewalk that came across the bridge, which will also continue down Mountain Road. We have a leg that will climb up to the Runnings development. And the sidewalk will also continue up to the intersection with Georges Field Road. This is an unsignalized intersection. It'll be pretty much the way it is today. It'll have the left turn lane into the site, a through lane eastbound, and then a right turn, again, same as it has today, a through lane, And then it's really just a matter of merging back into the existing lane configuration with two 12-foot lanes, a 4-foot shoulder on this side, and then on the left side would be an 8-foot shoulder. Now, part of constructing this, as I said, had to do with the boat launch. So looking to the south, what we're showing here in these colors here, this is the existing boat launch that comes off Prospect Street in Hinsdale. And this blue line that I'm kind of highlighting over here, this represents another road to public waters that was established years ago, and it was for this boat launch. As part of the improvements here, we're providing a horseshoe access for trucks, vehicles, and trailers to come in, turn, and then back down this ramp, which will put them in the main channel of the Connecticut River and not in this back area where people have to go under an overpass to get to the main channel. So we'll be improving access there. We have to realign the trail a little bit so that it crosses at the top of the ramp. We'll provide 9 parking spaces for vehicles and boat trailers, and then 9 spaces on the infield for regular car top vehicles, and 1 handicap accessible spot right here. And then we show a crushed stone path that will lead to the existing gravel parking area that Hinsdale already has. To make this work, the town of Hinsdale owns this parcel, and we've been in talks with them to work on extending this right of way to the south side of the improvements so that this entire area will be open to the public. And so I'll just go back to the large color plan here, the other one. And so I'll have these plans available if any questions come up during the presentation. I just finally wanted to point out that, so this is where we're interested is the existing bridge connections. And on the Vermont side in Brattleboro, we'll be closing off the existing 119, Vermont 119. So there'll be no access through here other than perhaps a gate or bollards or something that will allow emergency vehicles through. And then on the New Hampshire side, Hinsdale side, as I showed before, we'll have a path here, and this will also be closed off. One of the things I'll point out is this is a narrow, I think it might be 12 feet here, 12 or 16 feet, but there's no ability to park vehicles in there, because even if we tried to do like a parallel parking, it would be difficult to get the vehicle to turn around and then get out of here. So this limited parking on this side. And so that's really the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions if you want to entertain them now, or if you want to do that later.
And we have about up to 5 minutes for questions. If you have, please leave your questions in the chat. And Catherine, go for it.
Okay, I have a question. Mike Kowalski explains that he leads the Monadnock Region Rail Trail Collaborative. One project is to restore the Asheville Trail and Fort Hill Rail Trail with the goal to connect Brattleboro, Vermont with Keene, New Hampshire. The Fort Hill Trail currently ends 1 mile south of the Hinsdale Island. The goal is to connect the northern end of the Fort Hill Rail Trail to the Hinsdale Island bridges. Is or can this be taken into account with the planning of the project? In other words, provide a bike trail along Route 119, New Hampshire, from the Hinsdale Island Bridge to the southern end of the project.
So that's actually not part of the project. This is a bridge relocation project. We um, we will have the same accommodations that are out there now, a 4-foot shoulder, which opens up to it's 8 feet just before it becomes the right turn lane for Georges Field Road. Um, but it's a little outside the scope of this project to provide that trail connection.
If
Thank you,
I
Ken.
could add to that, I've definitely heard um, the desire to have that connection. Like Trent said, it is outside of the scope of this project, but it's something that we have our eye on, and we'll have to talk to New Hampshire DOT about the shoulders there at some point, whether there's enough accommodation for bicyclists to connect between those 2 points.
Okay. I have another question from Sherry. She says, will there be increased road runoff entering the Connecticut River from the new Route 119?
Well, I can't say that there's increase because the water today is already, one way or another, it's running towards the Connecticut River. We'll be channelizing more of that road runoff and actually treating it. There's not a lot of, if any, treatment facilities for the stormwater that's out there. So by providing 2 treatment areas, one on each side of the river, we're actually collecting more of the stormwater and treating it before it enters the Connecticut River. We can't capture it all simply because of the elevation differences. And for example, on the, let me switch to a plan here. So here on the Vermont side, we have closed drainage that's located on here, and we're only able to capture about this much of it because water flows downhill. And so we can catch it in here, but to the north and south of about this area, that water will still be collected, but it won't be able to be treated because we simply can't get it to this gravel wetland. On the New Hampshire side, we have a lot more control. We're pretty much capturing everything in the roadway and directing it to this pond, and then that will be treated before it goes out to the Connecticut River. So it's a big improvement, but I can't say that we're capturing everything.
Okay. I have a question from Bob Audette. He said, can Trent explain again why the rise on 142 is necessary to reduce conflicts with the train? I thought it was meant to eliminate conflict.
Well, I would say it is meant to eliminate conflict. Let me zoom in on this profile a little better here. So first of all, I should mention that this is an exaggerated profile, and that means that for every 5 feet in the horizontal direction, I'm sorry, for every 1 foot horizontal, it's 5 feet vertical. So that's to help see the difference. So this is a 1.5% grade. If it was a 1-to-1 scale, it would look very flat. So you wouldn't really see the different grades. So with that in mind, there's 3 rail lines that are located right here. And so we need to provide a 23-foot clearance from the bottom of the beams on the bridge to the top, clearance for the trains that run underneath it. So that's why we ended up having to raise 142 approximately 12 feet to get over that clearance for the trains. And so that actually won't be a problem. It'll improve it so that we won't have a conflict with the trains going and the traffic going at the same time. They'll be separated and they won't interact with each other like the way they do today, where 119 is located near the 5-way intersection. Does that explain that?
I think so. We have a couple more questions. So from Sherry, she asked, with the change in the grades, if the road surface is icy, will there be an increased chance of vehicles sliding or accelerating into each other?
So that's a good question. It's and I'll go to the Vermont profile here, and it looks pretty steep, doesn't it? Because of that 5-to-1 ratio. But the grades themselves, 5%, 4.5%, those really aren't that steep for winter conditions. We would be more concerned with anything steeper than that. And it's for a pretty short distance, so we don't see any problems with it, and we have closed drainage that'll be collecting everything off the roads. So no, I don't see that as being an issue.
And Fred Moriarty asked if there'll be parking available at the running parking lot.
Yeah, so we did have feedback from Deborah George, who owns this this development. She's very excited for the project, and she had offered to allow parking in the rear of the building. I think she thought that was an easy way to access the bridge area, probably more so than parking up front here and then coming around. But yeah, I think that's something that can be discussed, and it's certainly an option.
Hey, and one last question. Who will maintain the new boat access, Fish and Game, ? And is there a possibility for water hookup for washing boats?
Again, good questions. The maintenance of the boat launch today is with the town of Hinsdale. And so that doesn't involve a lot of maintenance because it's pretty self-sufficient. It's not open in the winter time. The new boat launch has had input from Fish and Game that gave us design tips for how to build a successful boat launch. But they're not in the business of maintaining boat launches through the state. They just made recommendations for how they thought this could operate. Fish and Game recommended that a site as big as this, it's probably going to get a lot of use. And so they suggested that a porta potty would be a good idea. And it's also possible that if trash were a problem, that we might recommend putting in receptacles. But because this is it's a town right away and the town will maintain it, the town will be responsible for the maintenance. But as I said, there's no winter maintenance, and in the summertime, we're thinking it would just be some mowing of the infield on occasion. Probably not a lot of effort there.
Thanks, Trent. I think there are even more questions, but I think we want to keep the program moving because we have other special content. And I just wanted to let everybody know that if we can't get to your questions tonight, we will post them on the SWRPC website with answers. We'll have to work with the experts to get the answers, but we'll make sure to post those on our website, which is www.swrpc.org. And I'll put that in the chat box.
Definitely. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, New Hampshire Department of Transportation. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Trent. Before we get on to our next presenters, the folks from UMass Amherst, we'd like to take a little bit of time and talk about the goals of the project. JB, I know we didn't talk about this. If you happen to have them and can put them up on a share screen, that might be good. I'm going to go ahead and read them off for everyone to hear. But some people like to read, and if you have that handy, great. If you don't, that's fine too. The Existing Bridges Subcommittee, in partnership with the Project Advisory Committee, has identified 6 potential goals for the project. Goal number 1 is to strengthen area social and economic relationships between the 2 states and the 2 communities. Goal number 2 is to promote active transportation. And by this we mean walking and bicycling and other physically active modes of transportation. Goal number 3 is to enhance recreation opportunities and river access. Goal number 4 is to preserve the integrity of the natural, historical, and cultural resources. As many of you will know, those bridges, thank you, JB. Those bridges have been with us for quite some time and are quite historically important. Goal number 5 is one that the existing bridges subcommittee came up with, and that is to conserve fiscal resources and to minimize the impact on the local taxpayer. And goal number 6 is to ensure that the area remains safe and clean. These are the goals we've established for the project, and they are among the many things that we would appreciate your feedback on, and we'll be doing some additional polling on these issues in just a little bit. But there are a couple other, thank you, JB. There are a couple other things I'd like to remind folks about. Our charge as the existing bridges subcommittee is to identify and draft a vision for the reuse of the island and the 2 existing bridges, the Charles Dana Bridge and the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge. To accomplish this, we need to gather input from the public about some of the ideas that, particularly those we're just about to show you, and to gather public input and support for this vision. It's important to point out that we are not tasked with implementing this vision. This is just the beginning of what will probably be a very long process. This project, if it is to come about, will have its costs. There may well be a change in ownership. Some entity will need to manage and maintain whatever is built, and some other entity will need to provide essential public safety services. So this is, fire and police and rescue. All of this will involve negotiation between political bodies and not the existing bridges subcommittee. These bodies will include the state of New Hampshire, the state of Vermont, and quite possibly the select board for the town of Hinsdale and the town of Brattleboro. Our purpose in this committee is to help to inform those future discussions about what is possible, about what is desirable, and the level of public support we can see for that vision. We will continue to keep people up to date on what is happening in the existing bridges subcommittee and about future public forums using press releases, social media, the town's website at both Town of Brattleboro and Town of Hinsdale, and certainly through the Wyndham Regional Commission and the Southwest Regional Planning Commission. I would again remind folks, if you want to stay directly engaged, to make use of the email address, admin@swrpc.org. That will keep you directly engaged with the existing bridges subcommittee. One other thing I'd like to point out is that this presentation is being recorded, and these materials will be made available, and they'll be made available on the Southwest Regional Planning Commission website, which is www.swrpc.org, and we thank Southwest Regional Planning for that. And just to let you know, we are contemplating putting up a separate website for this. That is still in the works. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to JB for some additional polling.
Thank you, Patrick. So yes, let's see here. What I'm going to do now is post 4 questions. With these questions, what we're trying to understand is what's most important to you in terms of programming on the future island and in the bridges area? Recreational types of activities? Should we focus on economic development? Should there be a focus on just environmental benefits or cultural benefits? So I give you a couple of about half a minute to answer these questions. Again, for the people in the chat, I will post the same question in the chat and you can answer according to the number of number of the question. I'll just give maybe 15 more seconds here. There should be something in the chat at the very bottom. Scroll to the very bottom if you're having trouble finding it. Oh, I didn't press enter. My apologies, Chief Rataj. Okay. I'm going to close the poll but folks that are using the chat, continue if you'd like. I'm going to end the poll here and share the results. About 50% of those participating today thought recreational benefits are very important to focus on. In terms of economic benefits, it was somewhat important. Although there are a few people that have said important, very important, or not important. And then environmental gets high marks from you all, as well as some people important, somewhat important, not important. And then finally, cultural, somewhat important, important, very important. So thank you for participating in that poll. I do actually have one other poll now that has to do with the goals that Patrick was just talking about. Again, I will post these poll questions in the chat, and if you can try to answer those, please do so. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds in the poll. All right, closing it in 3, 2, 1. Okay, and let's share the results here. Got a virtual tie here in terms of, so again, these goals are about guiding the vision for the two bridges and island area. Is it important to strengthen area social and economic relationships between the two states and communities? Most people thought so. Important or very important. Is it important to promote active transportation, which is a term for walking, bicycling, that type of activity? Most people said it was important, very important, and a few somewhat important. Is it important to enhance recreational opportunities, river access? Big score, very important there. And preserve the integrity of natural, historical, and cultural resources. We've got most people saying it's important or very important. Is it important that we conserve fiscal resources and minimize impact on local taxpayers? Most people say it's important or very important, though there are some that answered somewhat important, not important. And then the top vote getter for ensuring areas safe and clean, clearly very important or important. So thanks very much for participating in the poll, everyone.
Okay, thank you, JB. We appreciate that. You know, I'm not entirely sure whether it was JB or whether it was Chris Campany, but some months ago, there was a recommendation to the existing bridges subcommittee that perhaps we should reach out to a university and see if we couldn't get some assistance with visioning. And boy, are we sure glad that we did. We were able to reach out to the Department of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning at UMass Amherst. And tonight, we have with us Robert Ryan, who is the department chair, and one of his candidates for a master's in landscape architecture, Chris Ramage. And I will turn it over to the two of you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening, everyone. Just give me a second and I will share our presentation with you. Okay. So Professor Ryan and myself are here tonight to talk with you about some design and visioning work done by an undergraduate studio this past spring, collaborating with the SWRPC and the Windham Regional Planning Commission. And so what I will be doing is, in the first part of this presentation, just giving and going over a smattering of the site analysis and context that our undergraduates did in their studio that grounded their design thinking and visioning process. And then Robert Ryan will take over and go through a representative sample of some of the work done by these students this past spring. So just real quick for reference, we're looking here at the regional context for this project, the existing bridges and the Hinsdale Island bounded in the red box. And this was the focus for this undergraduate studio, looking at the island, the bridges, and the adjacent connections from the bridges to the Vermont and New Hampshire shorelines. And here's a zoom in of that focused area we just were looking at. Again, pointing out existing bridges, penciling in the proposed bridge that Trent went over so nicely and thoroughly earlier, and seeing some of the regional context, portion of downtown Brattleboro, the running store on the New Hampshire side. One thing our students dove into was the history of settlement, of use, and of access to the island. This island has been accessible via bridges of one form or another since the 1800s. This started out as private toll bridge access, but in the 1880s, the towns of Brattleboro and Hinsdale came together to purchase the toll connection and make access to the island public, beginning the long history, over 140 years, of public access to Hinsdale Island. Arguably, the peak of public access was in the early 1900s. In 1911, Island Park facilities were built on the island, pictured here on a color-rendered historic photograph. And this continued for a few decades. However, around the same time that Island Park was built, Vernon Dam was built about 7 miles or so downriver, significantly raising the water levels and submerging portions of the island. In addition, between 1913 and the 1930s, a handful of extremely severe floods and ice flows sort of just compounded the effect of rising waters from the new dam and served to wash away significant additions of the existing island, largely resulting in the island that and its footprint that we are looking at on our maps today. And so we can see here current footprint of the island, just a general topography map. And this island is very flat, with the exception being the existing Route 119 roadbed, which has a high point on the western edge of 235 feet, making for roughly 20 feet of grade change between the high point of the roadbed and the low point of the adjacent sections of the island to the north and south. The entirety of this island, with the exception of the existing roadbed, falls within the 100-year floodplain of the Connecticut River. So whatever is done on this island, we have to vision and design with future flooding in mind. The channel morphology around the island is quite unique. It's not even depth on either side. We have a significantly deep channel used much more often by motorboats on the western side, closer to the Vermont edge. And at the time that data was taken from a website that compiles data readings from depth finders on boats, this max depth was around 20 feet, but this changes with water level, this changes with seasonal and historic floods. But the important pattern being we have a deep channel to the west and a relatively shallow channel to the east on the New Hampshire side. The soils of our island are entirely hydric, meaning that at any time of year, you can expect the water table to be just about at the soil surface. Again, with the exception of the existing road bed, which rises significantly above grade and is made up of construction fill from Route 119 construction quite some time ago. Additionally, we have quite a robust vegetation community present on the island. The few dominant vegetative communities we can find there are floodplain forest, and this canopy cover exists immediately adjacent to the roadbed, extending outwards to the north and south. And then either shrubby or herbaceous wetlands, again, to the furthest northern edge or the furthest southern edge, with the southern end of the island being the largest contiguous piece of this wetland plant community. Additionally, at present times, the island, although not explicitly designed for it, does support various different forms of recreation. Boating access, we talked about that. Boaters enjoy setting up and hanging out around certain sections of the island. Kayakers routinely come up and down this stretch of river and explore around the islands. And there's also several frequented fishing spots for some of the warmer water fish that find a home in our deep waters north of the Vernon Dam. But the purpose of the rest of this presentation and the mission as explained of the existing bridges subcommittee is to look to the future and what the future holds for these bridges and the island. And so, as mentioned, this was the entire focus of the Spring Studio, whose work Robert Ryan will now present to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, Chris. So I taught a studio, which is a class, like a laboratory class at UMass in the spring with Josh Burgell. So this is the students' work I'm presenting right now. They were juniors at the time, now they're seniors in our program. And so they're fortunately able to visit the island before the COVID crisis and meet with folks from the planning agencies and get a handle on it before sort of the shutdown. So they were informed by visiting the island and learning about it. So you've seen a little bit of their research. They did a lot of research to learn more about the place. So I'm going to show you 4 of their ideas or visions for the island. And these are all up for discussion. Really, we want them to explore, what sort of direction could the island go? Maybe more environmental focus, maybe more developed, more active recreation on the island. So they all took it in slightly different direction, and there may be parts you like of some and others. And certainly, I think we want to hear tonight is sort of directions for the island rather than any specific thing you might see here. So the first student, Justin Haley, really looked at some of the historic predecessors to the island. and used that for his inspiration. And he's tried to reimagine looking at this island from the water's edge. And so I'll show you some examples of that, but this is his master plan off to the right side of the drawing. And you can see he's has the wetland where the water's coming in and a snaking kind of boardwalk on the southern end with a bike and pedestrian road coming across the island and an overlook on the north side. And to the left, you'll see some of his drawings of what those might look like. A boardwalk close to the water's edge and an overlook as well. So if I get the next slide, Chris. So he looked at one thing, his inspiration was the historic log jams that used to occur on this island when there was a lot of lumbering and lumber mills. And so he took this historic image and looked at today where there's not a lot of access under the bridges of the island and tried to imagine showing how we could have some interpretation under that. And he used the logs as inspiration for this boardwalk and sort of these pilings to hold that up. And you can see kayakers coming over who could connect to those. The next one. He also looked at one important thing for the students was to look at the connection from each of the two towns to the island. So this is a connection from downtown Brattleboro by the co-op, by the Whetstone Brook. And so he was really inspired by the beautiful scenery that was along there and put this, this boardwalk along it near the site, proposed site for the potential art museum, which is off to the right here. So again, using that timber detail and getting people right down to the waterfall along that area. And it would continue up into Brattleboro and connect some existing trails. Next slide. So one of the, I think the challenges is we see this as a road right now, but eventually it will be just pedestrian or a small driveway down to the brewery. So how will we change it in a way that is more pedestrian friendly? Right now it's not too friendly to walk down there to the island, though many people do it. So the next slide, you'll see his vision for what it could be. So one is a gateway into Brattleboro, right? A gateway into the town, some places for art and murals, a nice bikeway and a sidewalk along the side, and his brook path is off that bridge to the side and improving the planting areas along it. And so these are just some of the sketches for his vision for the island, and there's many more that each of the students produced for this. So we go to the next slide. The second student I want to talk about, this is Carter Roy. And he took, I would say, a more active recreation approach to the island. He wanted to make it for people in ways that people of different abilities could get to the island. So he has a Brattleboro Welcome Center off on the mainland, not too far from the Amtrak station, and a parking area so that people could park there.
Robert, you cut out.
Okay, let me keep going. I'll backtrack a bit. So he has a welcome area on the Brattleboro side, and there's some parking provided there near the existing Amtrak station as a gateway to the island. He reimagines the bridges with pedestrian traffic along them as well as bike traffic, and he has a section through that. He has an open lawn area for active recreation with views of the river, an amphitheater, which I'll show you pictures of, and a small beach. Again, this is on the leeward side of the island where it doesn't get a lot of current, but the deeper side. He's got a river nook and overlook on the north side, and he's got a wetland walk on the lower elevation. And he also has reimagined the bridge into New Hampshire as well, with some parking at the gateway on the New Hampshire side. So we go to the next slide. And so this is a section which is a view through this. And so he's got, as I mentioned, a beach. People like to get down to the water's edge. It's a beautiful views across. He's got a pathway for people with different abilities. He's got a amphitheater, a concert area with seating stairs. People could picnic along these, or if there is a entertainment, it's places for them to sit as well. And there's, I had the students look at providing accessible pathways, so someone in a wheelchair or other mobility issues could access part of the island. So that was another important charge for them, so that people could actually get down to the water. In the next slide. So one thing that we looked at was trying to provide food on the island for people that are recreating. So he had the idea that came from folks in town of food trucks that could set up. Again, they could come across the island using the emergency access, set up here and provide food for people on the island. It becomes a draw to bring them into the island. I mean, it could be revenue generating, but I think it's more to bring activity and life to that and provide, food for folks that are out there. And you can see the bike path that heads onto the bridge towards Brattleboro. Next slide. This is reimagining the bridge. Right now, there are 2 lanes of traffic, right? It's pretty wide because it's for cars and trucks. So we don't need that much pavement now if it's going to be bicycles and walkers. So he has a bike path off to the right, you can see, and it's organized if you start to get lots of traffic, so bikes for either direction. And then off the left, he's got raised planter beds with different wildflowers and pollinator gardens alongside a walking path. As well as I know he has some seating areas along the bridges so people can sit and look out at the water. And next slide. And this is the boardwalk he imagines, and this is the lower part of the plan on the upper right of your screen. It would be at the lower elevation. It would be of material that would allow flooding. So if the water does come up, it's going to be able to resist that. It's going to be able to take water on top of it and have water going down as well. So it allows that fluctuation, but it gets people into part of the island that's hard to get to now and allows some interpretation, environmental interpretation. So that was his vision for the island. The third one I'd like to show to you is McKenna Paulskill. And McKenna wanted to look at the idea of the historic island, which is this dark blue shape, the existing island, which is in the sort of tan color, as well as looking at a proposal to grow the island using natural accretion of sediment that would be flowing down the river, which is a natural kind of deposit of sediment, and bring the island back to a larger size based on natural succession. And so she sees that as something that could be accelerated through different construction techniques. And so in the next slide, she imagined some overhead artwork or installation on the bridge to bring some life to that bridge. She also imagines a kayak launch. This is from another park, but the idea of a kayak launch being important. We did see people carrying their kayaks across the bridge as well as down the side. So people seem to be able to take their kayaks a little farther as well. The next shows you some of these ideas. This would be the first phase. There's an existing smaller island to the right that exists now, which was originally part of that larger island park. It still remains. She would have these jetties you can see sticking out, and those jetties would help capture sediment that would help grow the island. So sediment over time would pile up. You'd start to get vegetation succeeding there and bringing some more wildlife habitat. She has a fishing beach off on the north side for fishing on the Commerce side. Overlook on the north called the Hilltop Overlook. Her kayak launch is a kayak launch. She looked at putting a kayak launch over on the Brattleboro side because that was closer to her parking, as well as a beach that people could kayak across to the island itself. And then a wetland boardwalk, which will be a theme you'll see. And she also shows the existing bridge, the proposed bridge, as it cuts across the bottom side of the island. And she was very interested in looking at the different species of birds and fish that are now on the island and in the Connecticut River, and how we can improve the habitat for them. So this kind of gives you, there are more than this, but this is some of the species you might expect to see here, both fish and birds. The final plan I want to show you, and there were 14 students in total, so we're just showing you 4 tonight, is Rachel Newman. And Rachel Newman took the approach of really, I would say, environmental focus and kind of a lighter touch to the island. And each of these areas she has, the emphasis is environmental education. And so as you enter the island, on existing bridge, there's an outdoor educational gathering space on the north side with views upstream. There's a rain garden walk, and we talked about the need for stormwater management, and so that would treat some of the stormwater that might come off the bridges and the paved areas of the park and treat it and clean it before it goes into the river. There's a terrace native garden, which I'll have a picture of a little bit later, that looks out over a very small sloped recreation lawn. I think several of the students include some small lawn area for picnicking or throwing a frisbee, that sort of thing. And you can see that she changed the alignment of the where the road bridge went to give it more of a curvilinear path and to follow a little more of the natural contours. She has some runnels which are capturing some of the stormwater and bringing it down into a wetland area off here to the south, and a woodland promenade off to the north. And she protects the wetland. In her case, she just has folks viewing into it, but not actually walking into that large southern wetland with the proposed bridge coming across. So if I could get the next slide, I'll show you a section through that, which is sort of a cut through. You can see her wetland boardwalk off on the left side of your picture. And she shows you some of the species like river birch that would be used to revegetate that area. She also used Goshen stone, some stone for seeding walls and retaining walls. Again, those are materials that will withstand the seasonal flooding, as well as these plant material will as well. She's got this rain garden with the walking area and seating underneath it. Native plantings. One of the issues that Chris alluded to is there are a lot of invasive non-native plants on the island. Bittersweet, buckthorn, and other things are not native, which some of the students looked at removing those non-native plants and promoting native plants on the island. And we do have a lot of lovely native trees, etc., still on there. She's looking at stabilizing the slope on the north side where it gets a little steeper, using logs and other things to stop any erosion coming off there. And again, eastern cottonwood being a native tree, which there's not a lot of on the island now. And her final image is that outdoor educational gathering space I talked about. This is a hand sketch showing how you would get down the hill, because we do have a steep hill, as Chris said, to go down. So she has a curvilinear path to get people down to that area. Some logs here in the woods for seeding and stabilization, and some seeding edges. And she has sort of an educator out there talking to a family groups to talk about the river, the island, and its ecosystem. So with that, we want you to think about not these just specific things you've seen, but sort of the goals of where things are moving on the island. And I think JB was going to do another poll, and then we'll open up for questions in the chat after the poll. So thank you for your time, and I think we'll turn it over to JB.
Thank you so much, Robert. That was wonderful. We do have just a couple of questions we want to ask you here. Really, we're asking you about what kind of experiences or activities would you like to see on Hinsdale Island and on the bridges? So we have two questions, one relating to the island itself and one to the bridges, and I'll just launch the polling now. Again, for those that don't have access to the polling, I will put the questions in the chat box. We're asking you to prioritize a little bit, picking your 5 top ones. But if you just can't resist and you like a bunch of ideas, that's probably okay. I'm going to give you 30 more seconds. Okay, great. I'm going to stop the polls and let's see what we got here. Looks like we have, you know, all of these ideas are pretty popular, but wildlife and scenic viewing was something that came out. A lot of people had that as one of their top choices, along with wildlife habitat and boating. I'm seeing a little bit of a theme with boating and really taking advantage of the river. For the second question with the bridge, our top two choices here are seating areas and picnic tables. But a lot of people like a lot of those different ideas. If you do have other ideas, I'd encourage you to share them in the chat box as well. Of course, you can use the admin at swrpc.org email as another way of getting back to us. We do have a little bit of time before we go to our wrap up for additional questions for Robert and Chris. Does anyone have any questions for them?
Judy, we had a question from Bob Odette, and he wondered if all 14 plans could be available to view.
Yeah, I think I saw Robert respond to that. I can work with Robert to make sure that we have all those available. Is that right, Robert?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
because we've got a box folder. I think we might have sent you a link. We can get it to you again if you don't have it.
Oh,
Then,
okay, thank you.
You absolutely can share them with the committee or however else you decide to do that.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
We have a question from Lisa. She says she loves the connecting bridge and the island activities to the Amtrak station. The Brattleboro Words Trail, to be launched in November, includes audio story segments on a downloadable app about Indigenous sites. A lot of people just, thank you, great presentation. Yeah, that's all the questions and comments we have so far.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I think, I think the students just touched the edge of the sort of historic cultural interpretation. So doing it both in a virtual way as well as actual signage or things would be great, I think, along there.
If I could ask the person who remarked about the, I'm going back up to it, the Brattleboro Words Trail. If you don't mind following up with through the admin at swrpc.org with more information, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, well, I did see a question, but it looks like about the color of the bridges and whether there's opportunities to change from the bland green that we have today. Does DOT want to tackle that? How have you managed bridge paint in the past? Don or Bill, I don't know if you have any. This was sent privately to me, so you won't see the question, but they're asking about does the bridge have to continue to be a bland green? And I'm hearing that he does actually want it to be. It's a question he wants to ask anyone. Bill or Don, you have a
JB,
reaction to that?
Do you need to unmute Don or Bill?
I guess it could be looked into. I'm not 100% sure if it would be allowed, how much leeway we would have, but we could certainly look into it. Don, I don't know if you would have other things to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a difference in costs or anything for different colors. I know sometimes there is. We'd certainly be interested in hearing if there is a specific color.
Yeah, let me read the question aloud for folks. So the question is, do the bridges have to continue to be a bland green, given that the opening up of space on the Brattleboro side has the potential to be transformative, making that area near the bridge entrance a wonderful public amenity? Why not make the bridges themselves beacons by painting them a bright color? I have in mind a bright red.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure everybody would have that in mind, but
So we'll check into it?
yeah, right.
Okay.
We have another question about, are we going to consider hiding the power lines that go over the bridges?
So the actual power, I think, will be cut off once we take traffic off. So that'll be a question whether or not the towns want power on the island. Likely we would do solar lights. That's what we're doing on the new bridge. So you wouldn't need lines for that. There may be communication lines that are still going to remain afterwards.
Okay, and one last question. It says, what is the plan to inspect and maintain the existing bridges for emergency vehicles?
So right now, the plan is to fix them up for like a 50-year life, and then turn the bridges over to the towns. And then the towns would have the responsibility to inspect the bridges every so often to be sure that they're still safe for the emergency vehicles.
I know that just from the students' designs, we did ask them to look at emergency vehicle access, and we asked them all to include a wide enough right-of-way for emergency vehicles to not only get to the island, but get across both of the bridges. So that's something we've tried to put in all the designs.
Patrick, you want to take us home?
Well, I'd be happy to. I guess what I would like to say first and foremost is thank you to everybody who presented tonight. The gentleman from New Hampshire DOT, thank you, especially Trent. And then I want to thank our friends at UMass Amherst. You guys have been doing a great job. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of these concepts develop a little further. Thank you, Professor Ryan and Christopher. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody with the regional planning commissions, JB and Chris, and the rest of my existing Bridges committee members, especially Catherine Lynch. Thank you. And unless there's nothing further, are we adjourned?
Yeah, I think we do have some extra time for questions if there are any.
Okay, well, keep going.
And I'm going to suggest that things are pretty stable, that we could open up, if somebody has a question, they can also raise their hand and we can open up the lines and let you talk. I'm making an executive decision. So to raise your hand, it's go to the bottom of the screen.
You may have to be in the participant mode.
Oh,
Click on participants and then it pops up.
yeah. Well, we'll wait 1 second. Okay, we've got a couple questions. And I'm having trouble seeing them. Rich, can you help recognize the questions with me?
I just unmuted Mike.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes. So my name's Mike Kowalczyk. I live in the town of Swansea, New Hampshire, and I lead a rail trail group called the Monadnock Regional Rail Trail Collaborative. And I'm working with folks in Winchester, Hinsdale, and Brattleboro to complete the restoration of the Ashwelot Trail and Fort Hill trails. And like I mentioned earlier, the Fort Hill Trail ends about a mile south of the island at this point. So I'd like the subcommittee to consider, can this project make that connection, or can at least put in place infrastructure so that that connection can be made along Route 119 sometime in the near future. And by making that connection, then we have, recreational pathway connection that would get us from Brattleboro all the way to Keene. And working with Steve Dotson in Brattleboro, he's also looking to get a connection up to the West River Trail, which then would get us all the way to Newfane, Vermont.
It's a great idea, Mike, and I will definitely take that back to the steering committee. I also saw that you were willing to come by and give a presentation to them, so I'll take that up with the co-chairs. And
thank you.
Yep.
Christopher
We have
Chapman.
a question from Christopher Chapman.
Hey, folks. This has been a beautiful presentation. I love what the UMass presentation. Deeply appreciate the clear and lucid description by the bridge engineers. So I'm the guy who suggested painting the bridge, and there's method in the madness to it. It's not just for fun. We want our communities all to stand out, and you recall that and in Shelburne, the Bridge of Flowers has made that little town famous, and it has attracted an awful lot of visitors, and the visitors bring money, I think that in both our towns, there would be a sense of curiosity stimulated by having a bridge of a different color. The rationale for the current color seems to be that it blends in and doesn't stand out to interfere with the view of the natural setting. But the bridge is actually an amenity now. It's about to become an amenity, not simply a functional piece of architecture. There's a great deal of fun that can be had in brightening the place up. Brattleboro was an industrial community for many years, and it's had to, really do a lot of cleanup of that industrial area near the Brattleboro foot of the Anna Marsh Bridge. When you recognize that the museum is going to be expanding and taking up a lot of space on the north side of the Whetstone, we've got a successful restaurant in there. Amtrak is going to be making improvements to the train station. We have the new co-op. We have the improved road that will be caused by, the improved traffic pattern caused by the new bridge, and the opening up of the Bridge Street space. It just seems to me to make it sensible to brighten up the bridge itself, to bring yet further attention to that area as an amenity. That whole area is going to be actually pulling the cultural heart of downtown south to that area. It's only on it's that area and the common to the north that are the only real gathering spots with greenery and open air at the moment, and that's going to be opened up even more when that bridge no longer supports vehicle traffic. So I thought that so I suggest something bright to bring yet more attention to the fact that is that is going to become much more of a cultural hub. So thank you for your patience. I would hope that you'd take that concept seriously. The wonderful UMass renderings didn't take into account the possibilities of the bridge other than for, the plantings and things along it without changing the actual color. But really, the color is important. I sat on the board of the museum for 6 years and was president for 4 and learned an enormous amount. I didn't go on as an artist. I went on as somebody to help with administration, but gained tremendous respect for the impact of color on an environment and on a society. So that's my input, and this was my big chance to get my word in. So thank you very much for patiently listening to this little monologue.
Thanks, Chris. I think I speak for everyone that we're glad you and everyone else came out, and you're as excited as we are about this opportunity and sharing your thoughts. And I think a number of people likely share your enthusiasm about the potential of this project to really increase the desirability, the attraction of your communities and this project in particular as a destination, and certainly design interventions that do not significantly add weight to the bridge. I'm sure our highway engineers will back up and say that those are attractive when you're talking about old bridges. Takes a lot of money to add more load-bearing capacity. So things that don't add a lot of weight, like paint, like other lightweight interventions, are definitely worth considering as the visioning process moves forward.
Chris, I saw a lot of people nodding. Thanks for bringing that idea to our attention. We have another question from Michael Abbott.
Yes. I think one of the other important considerations in all of this process, besides painting the bridge, and I only look at the existing bridge in Chesterfield and see its condition, never mind painting it red or green or whatever, is who's going to pay for the maintenance of these bridges once whatever plan is put in place. And I can tell you right now, there will be a lot of resistance if the town of Hinsdale and local taxpayers are asked to assume this burden.
Thanks, Mike. We are going to end at 8 o'clock, and it looks like we've hit 8. We'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Thanks for staying out late. A couple announcements I want to make. We are recording this. We will be making this available on the SWRPC website, and I'll also talk with Hinsdale Brattleboro and Windham Regional Commission about whether they'd like to host it as well. And my understanding is Brattleboro Community Access is going to be showing this on their television station as well. So if you please spread the word. We want to hear from more people. You can go to admin@swrpc.org to send me your email if you'd like to be on our mailing list. And again, thanks everyone for coming out tonight.